one of the most important healing steps was something I didn't even realize at the time. It was a letter that I wrote to my parents.
Into the subconscious and sit with the things that you haven't addressed before, and without judging them, allowing them to tell you what is underneath the surface.
And this 5-year-old self showed up in my elementary school. And what I was able to tell her is that she was loved and is loved, that she doesn't need to carry the guilt and shame that she's been carrying because it was never hers to begin with.
I'm doing this because this is my pattern. I'm doing this because I'm in fear. I'm doing this because I'm in lack. I'm doing this because I don't really believe in myself. I'm doing this because the more that becomes available.
Welcome to Mindfully Sovereign, the podcast that invites you to reclaim your feminine self-authority and unleash the abundance within. My name is Sapha, I am your host, and I'm here to help guide you past your limiting beliefs and into the heart of your unwavering and undeniable power. This podcast is all about reclaiming your feminine self-authority, learning the art of self-seduction, and awakening your inner goddess so that you can become an aligned match to your most abundant life yet. So grab a cup of tea, get cozy, and get ready to become mindfully sovereign.
Right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back. Happy Monday. I hope that you are having just the most beautiful day. And I have a super special guest joining me today. Her name is Heather, and you are going to love her to pieces. But as per usual with my show, I prefer to have my guests tell you about themselves rather than me just read off a list of things. So, Heather, if you could please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, the work that you do, and then we can get the conversation started.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's interesting. First of all, I'm 50 and I can't believe I'm 50. So that just tells you I've had this journey in my life where I have learned so much about finding root cause of what's going on with the human body. And it's been an evolution of finding this, right? Because first it was digestion, absorption, and immune system and hormones. But what I've come to find out over this time is really our own minds and our mindset and our unconscious mind getting in our way often. So I work with people just figuring out who in the world are they, helping them get out of their own way and restoring full health to their bodies so they can live life on their own terms.
Yeah, I love that so much. I think one of the things that I love about having these conversations with the guests that I get to have on the show is that there is always a thread of connection and commonality, and just a thread that to me strikes just truth across all things. And for me, one of those threads, and I say a thread, but yet really it's like a couple of them, right? But one of those threads to me is this truth about how important it is for us to remember that we are a whole being, that we're not just fractured. I'm not just my body moving through this world. I'm not just a mind struggling with a body or struggling with a heart. I'm not just a heart bleeding out. I'm all of these things. And what you say about really taking a look at that, getting out of our own way, really reminds me of the power of that, of the power of inviting every part of who we are into the conversation, and then moving into a further point of self-empowerment and self-awareness from that place on.
Mhm.
I love that so much. Yeah. So what got you into this world? Tell me a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, interesting enough, I always knew intuitively that I was put on this earth to help people. And so that began my journey in nursing. And I loved it. And I took care of people. I went to class. I learned all the science around it. But I also struggled with my own autoimmunity and my own pile of symptoms. And I really wanted someone to just tell me how to fix it. No one could do that. Imagine that. No one could tell me, how was I just going to get up and feel better? And I was
Mhm.
basically told, this is your destiny. You have autoimmunity. This is how you're going to feel. There's really no hope or change in your life. And I was not going to accept that because I knew there was a way. And it became a very evolution and journey, but as more, I always call it my redheaded stubbornness of you're not going to tell me I can't be something I want to be, right? I'm going to get there. And I'm going to prove to you that I can get there. So it went on this whole evolution of journey of figuring out. I actually felt a lot better when I didn't eat, and then specific foods that were bothering me. And, of course, the time, and I actually changed my entire career from nursing into nutrition. And then I got into gut health, and then I got into the immune system, and then I started getting into just like life balance, right? I can't tell you that I was living a life of balance at all, because I had to do more things. But come to find out, I was able to reverse my own autoimmunity by doing these particular steps. Now, looking back, one of the most important healing steps was something I didn't even realize at the time. It was a letter that I wrote to my parents when my oldest nephew was born. And I basically laid all the cards out on the table. I told them exactly, how they raised me and what happened and the things that were wrong in the house. And it was almost a threat that if they dared hurt my nephew, I would be there. There would be consequences.
Oh no. Hold on, Heather. I lost you for a second. Okay, you're back. You're back.
I'm back. Okay.
Okay, so you were telling me about the letter.
Yes. Anyway, I think I was in my early 30s. I shipped off this letter. I sent it to my parents. I addressed it and mailed it. I have no idea if they read it. But now it took me about 10 years, and looking back, that was a huge step in me recovering from my autoimmunity, that a big trauma piece had been lifted off of me. Now, it wasn't full, but it was enough for me to move on and feel better. The problems that kept happening, though, is the symptoms would start to come back. The more pressure, the more stress, the symptoms would come back. So they'd wax and wane into this evolution to where I was basically pushed into actually really working on the true root cause, which was all the emotional baggage that I had been keeping down and stuffed because I just ran away from it. I just never dealt with it. And so it became this big evolution in finding out, who in the world am I supposed to be anyway? Right? Who was I supposed to be? Oh, did we freeze again?
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. One of the things that we talk about a lot on the show is the truth about how the cellular structure of who we are really integrates all of the experiences of life, and it keeps them. So your body keeps all of that information, even though you might have healed and you might have dealt with something internally. There are things that your body itself hasn't dealt with in the process that goes through. So I love that you're bringing this up about like, hey, part of the healing journey was not just addressing the I don't want to call it superficial part, but the top layer of the healing part of the aspects of like what I was eating and how I was nourishing myself, but it was also this internal space of allowing myself to tell my parents, hey, this showed up, and the way that affected me is this and this, and kind of how that starts to take shape. And one of the things, I love this too, because that's one of the things that I always have my clients do is I have them write letters. My clients know that if they're going to, once they work with me, we write a lot of letters, like a lot of letters. Not that they all get sent out or utilized in the way that we think that they are, but they're there for alchemical purposes. And there is something so incredibly powerful about allowing yourself to pull yourself into the subconscious and sit with the things that you haven't addressed before, and without judging them, allowing them to tell you what is underneath the surface, so that then you can go into the deeper conversation with your body. Because it's great for us to wake up and do some somatic exercises and maybe do some tapping and some EFT and stuff. And for me, it's always a question of yes, and yes, we do that. And the connection goes deeper once the conversation goes deeper. And I love this too, because it's centering in the world of caring, right? You are someone who's a very nurturing person. You're someone who's always been like in that heart of caring for other people, hence like the nursing and all of these things. And then you go from caring for someone outside of yourself to caring for yourself. Tell me a little bit about what that journey was like, that difference between caring always for everyone else outside of you to caring for yourself, and what that experience was like.
This sounds, when I say this, I can't believe it took me so long. I think I was 48 years old before I realized, what are you doing to yourself? I was using this element of controlling my environment. And most people that I was around, they had no idea I was trying to control things because I was doing it internally. I wanted people to feel safe and balanced. So I was really trying to do this entire dance. And then realizing, oh my God, you were never in control of any of it. And the more I tried to control something, the more out of control it was. And the most impactful moments of my life were completely out of my control. So there just wasn't, but my mind kept telling me this, that it was
Mhm.
in this evolution of control. And so it was really hard for me to let somebody else guide me through a process. Because I was the caregiver, I was the protector. I needed to protect myself, right? Because when I was little, there wasn't anyone there to protect me, so it was me. And I had to let that shell down. I had to let someone guide me through a process, and I had to be willing to step in into the uncomfortableness of where I didn't
Mhm.
want before, right? I had to walk in it. And there's no doubt that you must go through the process. You can't go under it or over it or around it. You just can't. And it's going to feel hard. But once you get through to a
Yeah.
certain piece, it's almost
Yeah.
like being pulled, right? Um, and so, even intuitively knowing I was meant to be here to help take care of people, but just like you were saying before, we are not just a body, we are energy beings. And there is this waxing and waning in between these different elements and where we're supposed to be. And our energy affects everyone else. And if our energy is chaotic, we're going to gravitate, people are going to gravitate towards us that are going to cause more chaos, right? So we really have a lot of power over that, but we have to understand that our bodies are energy beings so that we can move through that process there.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's been a life changing process. And it wasn't that I didn't have joy and those kind of things through my life, but now I have this freedom that I didn't have before, right? That I can actually show up as who would I have been had none of the crap happened earlier in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It gets to be such an evolution. This is one of the reasons why I'm always so dogged about saying that we get to fall in love with ourselves and to live lives that feel like a romance for the ages. Maybe it sounds a little bit like head in the clouds or whatever, but I find it to be one of the most healing aspects because and it's a powerful tool because what it allows you to do is it allows you to hold the possibility that this person that you are today is going to cycle, like you said, is going to change, is going to give you room, and it's going to give you cues, and it's going to want to have conversation, and it's going to want to ask questions, and it's going to want to evolve. And that takes time, and it takes growth, and it takes a lot of courtship, and it takes a lot of dedication, and it takes a lot of attention. And I think it's beautiful to also understand, like you said, it's like I don't know why sometimes, well, I know why. There's reasons, right? And a lot of it has to do with the wounds of the divine feminine, but it's always so interesting to me to observe in real time that internal struggle between overgiving of ourselves and the more empowered action of pouring into ourselves, clearing everything out, and then allowing that space to overflow. And from the overflow, the people that we connect with are different. The connections we have, the relationships we have, the conversations we say, like the people that are drawn in, right? I try to tell people that we don't really ever attract because I think that the reason why that's become a little bit of a touchstone for people who've dealt with trauma, like myself included, is that when I was in a toxic relationship, the internal conversation and even some conversations with some therapists was like, I've attracted this person into my world, and it was so hurtful and so disempowering. But so what I do want us to understand is that we are sovereigns of our lives. This is the whole key of not just the show but the work that I do, and it's important for us to understand we are at the helm. At the end of the day, we are at the helm. And the more we deplete ourselves, the more we are willing to bend over backwards, the more we are willing to let ourselves down for the sake of someone or something else, the more likely we are to get stuck in dynamics that are not meant for us. And that's where we go. But I love this. I love this conversation so much. And here's something really powerful for us to consider. And it's that there is no age limit,
Right.
right? We get to evolve and become who we are every single step. Like we are who we are in our 20s, and we may not be fully cognizant of how powerful we are, but we are living the experience that we are living in that moment, and we are doing the best that we can in that moment. And maybe in retrospect, we get to look back and say, I'm in my 50s, I'm in my 40s, in my 30s. And I look back and it's like this whole thing. But so if there was something very focused that you could tell your younger self, right? That now with everything that you've gone through that would make her feel more loved and cared for and cherished and safe, what would that be? Or is maybe it's a bunch of some things, but if you can.
Well, you know what? I actually had this experience several months ago when I brought neurolingual programming into when I started learning about it and then became a practitioner of it. I was able to use it to go back to my 5-year-old self. I didn't plan on it. It's just what my unconscious mind basically brought up at the time. And this 5-year-old self showed up in my elementary school. And what I was able to tell her is that she was loved and is loved, that she doesn't need to carry the guilt and shame that she's been carrying because it was never hers to begin with. And it was a little bit of a long conversation, probably a 20-minute conversation, but it was this evolution that I could go back and show her, hey, you're fine. You're okay. You're loved and supported. And that's what women especially, they bash themselves so much about how they look. They're not good enough. Their hair's not good enough. Their skin's not good enough. Oh my gosh, they have a wrinkle. Oh, they're not fit enough. And
Yeah.
we will never tell another woman that, but yet we tell ourselves that.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to the cellular level, every cell in our body of our being that it feels that energy that we reflect back. So just being kind to yourself. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Be nice to yourself, because if you love yourself and you're kind to yourself, everyone else will follow because of the respect that you have for yourself.
Yeah, it's almost contagious. And the thing about is that you hit the nail in the head. And that's one, again, not to keep going back to this, but one of the things about the wounds of the divine feminine is that it's been pervasive for all of us. We've all experienced this, whether we realize it or not, whether we identify as feminine or not, whether we like femininity or not, whether we understand energetics or not, it doesn't matter. Every single woman in this planet has experienced this to some degree or another. And it is that we have been taught so deeply and so sneakily that we are nothing more than objects to fulfill a purpose,
Mhm.
that we have just learned to stay within those parameters, within that box, within that cage. And so we've disempowered ourselves and then started to believe that, you guys, excuse my dog for a second. Okay, well, that's what happens when we go live. But we've learned to believe that in making ourselves smaller and shrinking ourselves and quieting ourselves and being good, that is actually what's going to make us more empowered, and it's the complete opposite. And what doesn't tell the lie is the body. The cells are the ones that are going, hey, the more you stuff things down, the more I don't want to use the word flare ups, the more inflammation, the more aggravation, the more redness there is within the body, right? I just associate it with a color for some reason, but the more of that red, sharp, pain kind of stuff there is. And so I love that. I love that you got a chance to do that as well. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah. It's so important, right? Of how many women ignore how they feel and just keep going. They keep doing it. You know, how many women use their health to build their wealth, and then they're stuck, and then they have to use their money to get healthy again. It's like this vice versa, right? But you can have the balance of both.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and it's a cyclical thing. It's we get into these patterns because we believe they're going to afford us some sort of safety or some sort of equilibrium or control. You used the word control earlier, and I think that that's an important one. When the truth is, pretty much the one thing that we can quote unquote control is that nothing is within our control. We really get to choose to just flow with the fact that there is no actual control. And the more we understand that, the more accessible the softening around the edges is, and the more readily available the awakening to, I'm doing this because this is my pattern, I'm doing this because I'm in fear, I'm doing this because I'm in lack, I'm doing this because I don't really believe in myself, I'm doing this because I'm still, the more that becomes available. And so that's what we call embodiment. That is when we go outside of just reading about it in a book and to living it in real time. So I'm curious, what has been that process of living in a more loving connection with your body, especially moving through that autoimmune space, right? Because sometimes when we feel sick, we're even harsher to our bodies, or at least I tend to be. So, what has that transition been like for you?
It's been, I can say, mentioning them at 50, and if I go back to 21, 22, like, I feel so amazing and so much more free and just so much better, so much healthier, so much stronger now. And what I do know is my autoimmunity could come back if I didn't do what I do, and I do what I do for a reason, right? It People need power back within their health, right? And a lot of times we're told, and just when we were talking about dissecting the body, right? Healthcare has dissected the body. You have a cardiologist and you have a neurologist, and you know, well, you have to look at the body as a whole. And we have gotten in that evolution, and we really need to go back the opposite way of intertwining how everything else is working. And you know, there is no doubt I was put into the place to go through this whole process of really finally dealing with all of the stuff that I had shoved down for so many years in preparation for the next big major thing that was coming my way that I couldn't see and had no idea was coming. And had I not taken those steps, I have no idea. I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now, had I not taken those steps before.
Mhm. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's back to the same holistic view, right? We've dissected things. We've started to relate to the self as these separate things. The body is one thing, the fat in the body is another, the gray hairs is another. And instead of looking at the person as a whole, medicine does that. And what's curious to me too, and you can speak to this, I'm sure, as being a nurse, what's curious about that too is that there is a lack of education for all of the amazing wonderment of medicine, which I love how far along we've come. For all of the wonderment of medicine, there are so many pieces to the puzzle that are dismissed, ignored, and completely invalidated because we don't consider them to be a part of the whole, one of them being nutrition. One of them being the way in which we nourish our bodies. So, and I know, but maybe our listeners don't know, that doctors only take about a month of nutrition and then they move on and they're on to something else. And they don't really truly understand what it is like to nourish the bodies and nourish this beautiful, amazing being that we get to be. So, let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what was it like once you were able to put that together and say, hey, yes, these are my components and I want to show up for the whole. And I'm choosing to nourish myself. I'm choosing to write this letter. I'm choosing to heal from the inside. I'm choosing to look at myself as this amazing person that will be kind to herself, right? What was that component in the realm of that nourishment? Because I'm sure that played a big role as well.
The nourishment played a tremendous role. And it was very interesting, as I actually just wrote about this in a collaborative book about my restrictive and binging eating disorder that I had, right? And when I said that I felt better when I didn't eat, I truly did feel better when I didn't eat. But then I would go to the opposite extreme and all this inflammation would come back, right? So it was also my choices in what I was eating because I wanted cake and cookies and cinnamon rolls and I would do it all, right? And it would cause a ton of inflammation in my body. And noticing that and noticing no one else could find the answer for me and I was going to figure it out. And yes, I did try gluten multiple times. I did try dairy many times, hundreds of times to make sure that it caused a problem. And every time it did cause a problem when I introduced it back in. And so that gave me my parameters. Okay, I can eat this. And I ate clean and I ate real food, but I'm going to tell you, I did not start eating vegetables on a regular basis until I went into holistic nutrition. And I started teaching my patients how to do it. And I knew that I had to do it if I was going to tell them to do it. Change it. I knew it in my brain scientifically, like what it was going to do with all these micronutrients. But it was a big shift. And we overlook of what we put into our mouth and how it was prepared. And, just even preparing the food in a nourishing way, right? In a holistic way. It's huge. The love that comes through food. It's huge. And so just knowing that we're beings that have to eat. If we could survive on air alone, I would love it. But we don't. We need to eat clean most of the time, eating real food. It doesn't mean you're going to perfection or going to this restrictive diet, because that's not good for someone either, right? It really needs to be diverse and real food, and looking at that as a big component of let's eat the real food and work on digestion and absorption, right? And all the mindset and taking care of your body collectively,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
our body wants us to take care of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And I love that that's one of the things that we have in common, which I like knew. By the way, I know I didn't say this earlier, but this is yet another guest that shared the Women Thrive Speak, summit with me. So this is how we got to know each other. But that's one of the things that I'm so glad we connected over, because I heard you and I'm like, I totally understand. One, having gone through an eating disorder myself and just experiencing the absolute breaking that can bring to the soul, the fracturing, the fragmenting. We've been talking about those fragments so much, and it's so true. What happens when you start relating to yourself as this enemy that you have to whip into shape because it isn't looking the way that you want it to? Dang, it's like it's such a heavy burden. But once you start healing that and understanding that this is a way of caring for yourself and that there is import in loving into yourself, you're right. The way in which we cook our foods. Also, one thing that I always tell people is everyone is going to be different. I have three brothers. My oldest, right? He does really well with protein-based diets. I think that if he's tried Atkins before and he loved it, and now he got into like a carnivore kick here for a little bit. It's a whole conversation. But the reason I bring it up is I've told him, dude, you do really well with high protein. That doesn't mean that you avoid vegetables and things, but it just means your body really likes this. There was a time that I could not process or digest protein like at all, not even a little bit, right? So whereas people can't deal with gluten, for example, my personal body couldn't deal with protein. And so what I started doing is healing. Like you said, we start at a point. We start from the inside out. We start at the gut, start healing that, start healing all of that space, little by little, reintroducing. Sometimes we reintroduce and it doesn't work, like you talked about. Sometimes we reintroduce and it really works. I'm at a point where I eat everything and I don't worry about anything. I don't count calories. I don't restrict. I don't really do anything. I eat what I want and I let my body enjoy. And one of the reasons that is such a big shift for us is because, and this is important to address here as well, is I think we also believe that when we allow ourselves to enjoy something, that enjoyment is going to lead to a complete loss of control, and it doesn't have to. And I love that you've experienced that because you can speak directly to that.
It is so true, right? And if you even think about what women have been told, eat less, exercise more, right? You go into the doctor, oh, your problem is you're overweight. No, it's not. And I was told that when I was, I think, 12 or 13 years old, when you'll see some pictures during the summit, but I was told by my doctor, you just need to lose weight and you'll be fine. And that was not what I needed, but that was really that trigger that turned on that eating disorder. It's like, oh, I'm not going to
Mhm.
eat and that's going to be okay. And I carried that so long, right? And I did get so restricted, but my food was under my control. I could control
Mhm.
my exercise too much. I could control my food, either not eating now or eating here. But it was always in my head that, oh, if I ate that, then I was out of control and I had to do it, right? That was a bad thing, that I don't need to be doing that. And now I just eat. I just eat to nourish my body. If my body wants it, I eat it, right? Um, I don't have to I don't struggle with my weight at all anymore, because I'm eating the right foods. But I also dumped a
Mhm.
lot of that emotional baggage too, right? There was that big struggle with it. And through that whole evolution of teaching people nutrition, and back in 2010, it was not common to talk about food and talk about
Mhm.
not eating gluten back in 2010. People are like, why would you ever do that? Right? Like, that's all in your head. And probably it was, a lot of it was my unconscious mind interfering with my ability for my body to work effectively. But
Mhm.
I was guiding people into these more restrictive diets, but then I would step back a couple of years later. I'm like, oh, this isn't good, right? So this is this
Yeah.
whole evolution of learning what the human body actually needs. And there's not one right way to eat or wrong way to eat. And the same body does not need to eat the exact same way its entire life. It changes.
No. Yes. Oh, Yes, I could like cheer right here. Because this is exactly what I have been saying for so long. And the thing is, it's an important conversation because we don't get to have these. One of the things that I will highlight often within this podcast is how interesting but also important it is for us to know that we really weren't taught how to be in relationship and in intimacy outside of the romantic relationship scope. We were told, wait for your knight in shining armor, live happily ever after, blah, 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 the ways that we keep women underfoot, right? But we were never taught, and by the way, this also extends to men because men don't really know how to relate either or create intimacy. But so we were never taught how to create those things within ourselves in such a way that we can then have these conversations. Hey, this feels really good for my body right now. My body is changing today. I had a yoga teacher once who used to say that in the morning, you wake up in the morning and the yoga fairies have taken your powers away. and and it's relatable because it's like that. Okay, one day I can touch my toes, the next day I can't. One day I can eat cheese, the next day I maybe can't. And so you want to listen to your body and allow it to guide you and understand that where there is hyper rigidity and when there is an inflexibility or a space of it's this way or no way, that's a space for us to really become mindful and start questioning where our own personal sovereignty lies. Because more often than not, those spaces of hyper rigidity are spaces of guilt and guilt and shame are weapons utilized to enslave us. So we want to always be mindful and say, and even internally, these are conversations you get to have with yourself. If I'm being hyper rigid about this and I'm afraid that if I eat one chip, I'm going to die, then this is a conversation that I must be willing to have with myself. And I very rarely use the word must, but this is imperative because it goes down to the heart of learning to trust ourselves. So many people will come to me, when we start working together, like, I can't trust myself. And it's so funny to me. I'm like, I totally get it. We don't trust ourselves because we don't trust to listen to our bodies when they tell us they need to go to the bathroom, when they tell us that they're hungry, that they're thirsty, that they're itching, that they're horny. Like, we don't trust our bodies, right? We don't trust the self. And so we want to start healing those relationships. And it's so important for us to be having these conversations and say, you know what? I thought this was the way. And I thought that if I had, again, one scoop of ice cream, I was going to devour the whole thing and die. And it doesn't get to be that way. There is this broader conversation to be had. And there's broader conversation than just because it sounds like you experienced something very similar to what I experienced when I started doing nutrition consultations back in the day, is that I thought it was okay, people need to eat lean, clean, and green. And that was like the mantra for many of us for a long time. And it's like, no, man, like each person gets to eat what they need to, when they need to, how they need to, because of what the things that they need to. And it just changes the whole narrative.
In a way, it does. And we weren't meant to be put in a box. That's not how we are, right? It is not a this way or that way kind of situation when it comes to our body. And it's not a right or wrong situation. And what's right today may not be right tomorrow for us. And that's okay. And we just have to embrace it, right? But I think we all look for this. Well, if I just had this one thing that I just knew that I just had to do exactly this one thing, it'd make my life easier. But it actually makes our lives a lot harder.
Mm-hmm.
Here's,
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was in taking my holistic nutrition classes, and I was working full time, well over full time, probably 60 hours a week, and taking classes. And I'm on the stair climber for my second workout of the day because I'm sure I was training for something. And I'm reading this book on adrenal fatigue. No joke.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, I could see how this could happen. That's not me. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I was in such denial that where I was going and what I was doing to myself. So when I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, the things I used to torture myself with for no reason.
That cognitive dissonance, man, it is so strong. And that's the thing is if it is there, you're not going to know it's there.
Yeah.
And they could present you like you're reading this. It's in front of you and you're like, that's not me. I can so relate to that. And funny enough, relate to the opposite, which was like, yeah, that's me, but it doesn't matter. Like I'm only focusing on this for everybody else. It's like, do as I say, not as I do kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting.
the things that we do to ourselves as humans. But it starts changing, right? And I think that all it takes is one little taste. Like one little taste of freedom, one little taste of understanding that there is power in allowing ourselves to desire, allowing ourselves to want, allowing ourselves to be cherished, allowing ourselves to be respected. This could go so many different ways. But we have one little taste of that, and all of a sudden, everything starts becoming clearer and we start seeing the cracks just a little bit more, right? And that is also, I think, really important. So maybe that little taste is this conversation that we are having. Maybe that little taste is that someone, somewhere, somehow, some way gave you a hug the day that you needed it, the day that you thought you were going to crumble to pieces, right? Maybe that one little taste, it just could be so many different things, but stay open and allow yourself to receive, because the receptivity is the biggest change, right? So curious, since we're like talking about that, what would be like one of your little tastes originally that started to make that difference for you? Do you think that made the difference between, oh, that's not me, to, oh?
I'm going to say this one because it was a big one. The taste of realizing, oh, things need to go a different direction was I walked away from an integrative functional medicine practice that I had built from the ground up. And I did that because it was a toxic relationship between the doctor and I didn't realize it because I didn't want to see it because I know how I treat people, right?
Hmm.
And so that little taste was after I quit my job, I went to the gym and then I went to Target. That's it. I went to gym and the Target. I'm driving home. I was like, is this what people do when they don't work 16 hours a day? They just go to the gym and then they can go to the store. It was this whole opening of, oh my good God, what have you been doing to yourself? You're preaching this to everybody else. But I really did think I was taking care of myself. I wasn't. I just thought it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so simple. It's in the sneaky little places. It's in that pause, I think. And it often means things fall to pieces before we realize it. And sometimes it's just like that moment where we're sitting there sipping our coffee going, this doesn't seem so sane anymore. Like, this just doesn't seem to make so much sense as it once did anymore. Why? So I just love that that was your little taste. Ah, Heather, okay, we're getting closer to like finishing the conversation. So is there anything in particular that you really want to share with the listeners that you feel like it's an important piece of this conversation we've been having that you want to just like lean into for the next couple of like moments?
Mhm. The most important thing that I want to just explain to people is pay attention to your body. Be aware every day. Check in on how you feel, right? When you're paying attention, your body is going to speak to you and is going to tell you what it needs, right? A lot of women, like, they're dragging, they're tired, they're just coffee after coffee. And what they really need is they need food because they didn't eat, because they just rush out the door. And then they need hydration. And sometimes we just need to listen to our body just for a moment and say, hey, do I just need the basic necessities of life right now? Right? Your brain's not working and you haven't had lunch and you haven't had breakfast. It's not working because you need nourishment. So it's just really checking in with your body every day.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll add into that, like, I always tell people this is so funny, but when I first started my work as an intuitive, right? Like, I've always been very intuitive, but I kind of always brushed it off to the side. One, because it was demonic in the realm that I was brought up in. And two, because I didn't understand it. But one of the ways that I started retuning myself to that like intuitive space was through listening to my body. And this is going to sound silly, but it started with me literally paying attention to when I needed to go to the bathroom. Like,
Absolutely.
because yeah, and the thing is, a lot of us work in cubicles, or we work in environments that are very fast paced. You're on your feet a lot if you're a nurse. At one time, I actually even work renting cars. So, and in that environment, it was like back and forth, like on my feet all day. So there are reasons why we start quieting the parts of the self that really need to speak to us, to include the body, physical body. And it's also important to unlearn that. It's important to reframe and to realize that no, you needed to go to the bathroom and it's okay. You're an adult. You don't need to raise your hand in class and ask for permission. You can go to the bathroom. And that sounds silly, but it's the same. It's kind of what we're talking about, is you want to listen to your body. You're always speaking to you. The question is, are you listening? And then if you're willing to listen, then are you going to go against the grain and say, shut up? Or are you going to say, oh, no, you're right. I want to honor you.
And what people also need to know is if you're not listening to your body, it will get louder and louder
Hmm.
and louder and louder. So you're going to be dealing with more things, and life is going to feel harder until you finally say, okay, it's time. I need to listen. What's going on?
Yeah, it's not a puppy that you just go shush
No,
and it's
no,
not.
shush, it won't. Because, everyone has stress, right? We live life. Life is stressful. No one has a stress-free life. What we can change is the perception of what's happening and make sure that we're looking at it realistically and not going down the worry train of worrying about things that haven't even happened yet.
Yes, yes. And it's important to mark the distinction between like the kind of stress that allows us to grow, like meaning that slight contraction. I always compare it, me being the divine feminine person that I am, right? I always compare it to that birthing pain, right? The contraction isn't nice, and yet it is creating life. It is bringing life to you. A stress that is going to completely disempower and maybe feel like it's going to disembowel you, but like really put you down is the kind of stress that we tend to live within, that we believe that the world is going to crash on us at any given point in time. And that's the kind that we really want to just work through and move beyond and go above and beyond to kind of really give it voice. And it changes things. Like it changes things, read. I know, Heather, you mentioned about the book, so I'll let you talk about the book a little bit so that they can go and find it, but so because it's a beautiful story that you have to share in there. So tell us about the book, where they can find it.
So the book is called Women Thrive Volume 4, and you can find it on Amazon, but a lot of people aren't shopping on Amazon, so now you can find it on Barnes and Nobles also, which is actually
Amazing.
probably the more appropriate place to find that right now.
Yeah.
And within that is the most amazing collection of stories from struggles that people went through, these women went through, and it's how they overcame. And now they're living a life that they want to live. And we have to know that life, there's struggles in life. Everybody has them, and it doesn't matter what it was. There's no comparison. It matters how the body actually was affected by that particular thing. And inside that book, I wrote about something that I spent 49 years running away from. And then I wrote about it. And now I talk about it. But it was a piece of me that I was holding guilt and shame around. And it's an
Mhm.
important piece because life, we are not what happened to us.
No.
Things happen to us, but that is not what creates us. And that is not who we have to be. And we can decide who we want to be. And we can take action into who we want to be. And that's what the book is about.
Absolutely. I love it so much. And that's the whole idea of that mindful sovereignty, right? So it's just so good for us to remember. I always tell people, you are not broken. You are not the things that happened. You are the authority within the things that happened. And the little pieces that feel very raw are the ones that you get to fill in and heal and grow and watch and live with. And so I just love that so much. So, Heather, we sort of answered this already, but let's go for like a twofold answer, right? I usually ask guests to tell me what their idea of what a mindfully sovereign person is. So, like, tell me what it would be like to be mindfully sovereign in your words.
Yeah, absolutely. So mindfully sovereign, it means you're at peace with yourself. You have balance and you have peace, and you are stepping in and living life how you want to, and you're handling things as they come up, right? That you're living and feeling peaceful when you wake up in the morning.
Ah, I love that so much. I love that. I'm so happy we got to do this today. It's just been such a delight. You are just lovely as always. And then before I let you go and we say the official goodbye to everybody, just please tell people where they can find you, how they can connect with you. And I mean, all of this will be in the notes as well, but it's
Absolutely.
good for you to say.
So you can find me at my website at flourishnutritionaltherapy.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Facebook's not my favorite, but probably Instagram and LinkedIn are the best best places, under Heather Hanson.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was so good to chat.